Welcome to the Human Momentum Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Schabert. I created this podcast to leverage 12 years of osteopathic medical training and over a decade of experience in primary care medicine to help sort through the confusing and sometimes contradictory health information found on the internet. I want to distill all this information down to a form that you can use every day to optimize your health as you move forward through life. So if you are looking to get to life's finish line with the ability to do the things you love intact, then this podcast is for you. If this is your first time here, please don't forget to smash the subscribe button and throw us a like as well. It really helps us get this information out to more people. With all that said, let's move on with today's episode. Welcome to the latest edition of the Human Momentum Podcast. Today, I want to do something that's a little bit of a departure from some of my previous videos in that I want to dive into a research topic that is still kind of in its early stages. We're starting to get some real signals here, but it's nothing definitive. It also applies to something that I would generally categorize as lifestyle medicine. That is medical interventions where our primary method of affecting the disease process is through diet, exercise, and other lifestyle related things like that. In particular, today, I'm going to talk about chronic constipation, especially as it applies to the more constipation predominant version of irritable bowel syndrome. This is relatively new research just published in January of this year that involves the effect of genetics on stool frequency in individuals with chronic constipation. This research is rather interesting. It comes out of Great Britain using a massive database there and was published in the journal Gut. This is a solid peer-reviewed journal, and so this research is something that piqued my interest. Research like this very frequently will get pushed up on social media as if, oh my gosh, it's a settled question. We now know that this is the effect. And that certainly is not the case here. So I wanted to cover it in a little bit more nuanced way to give you the idea that, this is intriguing and maybe something worth discussing with your doctor, but it isn't certainly something where we can make any kind of universal recommendation. What this research showed as they broke down numerous genetic patterns is that we have a signal here showing that if certain genes show up, it impacts stool frequency in individuals with chronic constipation rather negatively, to the point where the researchers thought this may be causal. In other words, this could be the causative factor. And it gave them the indication in this case that two specific thiamine related genes, when they are expressed in a specific way, can have a negative effect on stool frequency, reducing stool frequency and increasing constipation. And that effect might be mitigated somewhat by improving thiamine intake in the diet. Thiamine is a water-soluble vitamin and is available in a lot of foods. So this has some pretty significant potential for positive therapeutic effect. As I went through research that was along the same vein, I stumbled upon two 2024 studies that may have some significant applicability along with this 2026 genetic study. The first of these showed that there was a strong cohort type association. In other words, they looked at groups of people and teased out those who had chronic constipation. And in this group, they saw consistently that those individuals had lower intake of thiamine, and that the reductions in stool frequency in the group with constipation very much followed a pattern where the less thiamine intake was in the diet, the more that stool frequency was impaired. So that's rather significant and is suggestive of the type of relationship that we saw in this genetic study. Along with that, there was a second small randomized control trial where they took individuals who had a different condition, inflammatory bowel disease, but had been effectively treated, and looked at those in that group that had residual fatigue, and then tried to evaluate potential causes of it. What they found was the individuals who had persistent fatigue had rather consistent overexpression of two specific gut bacteria, and that improving thiamine intake in their diet, in this case, supplementing with high dose thiamine, reduced the overexpression of these bacteria and seemed to resolve the fatigue in about 2/3 of the individuals. The reason I think that third study is significant and may somewhat apply to the original genetic study is that thiamine is shown in this study to affect the gut microbiome, and that had a significant impact on a GI related symptom set. So this gives us the idea that increasing thiamine intake may affect the gut microbiome in a way that is positive for GI function. Little bit of a stretch to put those two things together, and they may not be related, frankly. But I think it's not unreasonable to try and make that connection. Certainly, further research is needed on all of this to make definitive conclusions. Well, as to where that leaves us with this current base of knowledge, it means that if you're somebody who suffers from chronic constipation and IBS, and you've previously been diagnosed and had all the other potential causes for this symptom set ruled out, because let's remember, in medicine, we call this an idiopathic condition, meaning we don't really have concrete ideas about what is causative. And because of the fact that this is also what we call a non-specific symptom set, meaning that there are multiple things that can cause constipation, you need to have a doctor evaluate you if you are suffering from this long term and make sure there aren't any other specific identifiable diseases that are causing it for you. So please do make sure, if you suffer from chronic constipation, to seek out a good primary care physician in your area and have this discussion with them. If they think it's appropriate, trying to pursue the kinds of foods that can increase thiamine in the diet certainly could be helpful. If you are looking to increase your dietary intake of thiamine, then by all means look at pork, especially chops and loins, salmon, trout, sunflower seeds, flax seeds, legumes like soybeans, peas, black beans, and some vegetables like asparagus. This is by no means an exhaustive list. Feel free to look up other potential sources that may fit into your own personal dietary patterns. But do have this discussion with a physician in your area because it could potentially be helpful. Thanks again for tuning in to this latest edition of the Human Momentum Podcast. Please do remember that liking, subscribing, and sharing really does help me get this content out to more people. So if you found this helpful, please do that. If you have additional questions based on the information I presented to you today, feel free to fire away in the comments section, and take a look in the description if you want to check out some links to this research that I'm discussing today. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I'll catch you again next time.